In the spring of 1900, a former samurai stood outside a brick building in Ginza, selling Western umbrellas. 32 years earlier, he had carried 2 swords by law. Now he carried inventory. 3 blocks away, electric streetcars rattled past a Buddhist temple where monks performed rituals that predated the city itself. Young women in modified kimonos walked toward textile mills, where shifts began before sunrise. Their grandmothers had never left their neighborhoods. Tokyo had become 2 cities occupying the same space. 32 years earlier, this city had a different name. Edo had been the shogunate's administrative center for 265 years, a wooden metropolis of samurai bureaucrats, merchant quarters, and hierarchies that felt permanent. When 15-year-old Emperor Meiji entered in 1868, renaming it Tokyo, the urgency was existential. Japan had watched European powers carve China into spheres of influence. The Opium Wars had sent an unambiguous message: modernize or be colonized. There would be no gradual transition. The new government dismantled feudal structures within months. Samurai lost their stipends. Class distinctions were legally abolished. The capital became a laboratory. In 1872, the first railway connected Tokyo to Yokohama. In 1882, the Bank of Japan opened in a building that could have been lifted from Paris. Western advisors arrived at extraordinary cost: French legal experts, German physicians, British naval instructors. The calculation was deliberate: accomplish in 3 decades what Europe had taken 3 centuries to build. The Meiji leadership understood they were performing social surgery without anesthesia, but the alternative was subjugation. By 1889, Tokyo had a Prussian-style constitution, an active parliament, and gas lamps replacing paper lanterns in government districts. The city's infrastructure was being rebuilt while people still lived inside it. Construction dust mixed with incense smoke. Wooden houses stood next to stone banks. The speed was the strategy. The costs would appear later in forms nobody had planned for. By 1900, Tokyo's population had reached 1.5 million, absorbing 500,000 new residents in a single generation. The city operated on dual infrastructure. Ginza, rebuilt after an 1872 fire, displayed brick storefronts, gas lights, and architecture imported from London. 2 miles away, neighborhoods functioned as they had in 1850. Wooden structures, communal wells, family businesses unchanged for generations. The contradiction was strategic. Modernization served specific purposes: military capacity, industrial output, diplomatic credibility. Daily life adapted more slowly. In textile factories along the city's edges, 12-year-old girls worked 14-hour shifts operating British machinery. Their contracts, written in pseudo-Western legal language, were signed by fathers who couldn't read them. The girls lived in factory dormitories, sent wages home, and learned that industrial labor followed different rules than traditional apprenticeship. Meanwhile, Tokyo Imperial University graduated students trained entirely in Western sciences. They returned to neighborhoods where fortune tellers still practiced, marriages were arranged by consensus, and Shinto festivals marked time with the same authority as the new Gregorian calendar. The streets became stages for incompatible performances. A ministry official wore British suits to work, changed into traditional hakama at home, and attended no theater while his children studied French grammar. Time itself operated on multiple systems: imperial calendar, Western calendar, and agricultural rhythms that still governed life outside urban centers. Rickshaw pullers competed with electric trams for the same roads. Buddhist temples distributed amulets while pharmacies sold German medicines. Nothing had been resolved. Everything had been placed side by side, waiting. The efficiency of Tokyo's transformation created problems no one had designed systems to address. The generation born after 1868 inherited a country their grandparents wouldn't recognize, but the psychological infrastructure to process that rupture didn't exist. Young men studied Western philosophy at university, then returned to families operating on Confucian principles unchanged for centuries. Intellectuals began documenting what they called cultural fracture, a condition unique to societies that had compressed centuries of change into decades. In factories, productivity numbers impressed foreign investors, But labor inspectors who investigated found dormitories where girls slept in shifts, using the same bedding in rotation. Industrial efficiency had been imported. Worker protections had not. The Meiji government prioritized military modernization above social welfare. By 1900, Japan had defeated China in war, shocking Western powers and validating the transformation strategy. But victory embedded a dangerous lesson. Rapid change through state control worked, and costs could be managed later. In Tokyo's working-class districts, that deferred management was becoming visible. Tuberculosis rates climbed in factory zones. Alcoholism increased among displaced former samurai who had never developed alternative skills. Suicide rates rose in non-ritual contexts. Economic desperation, social dislocation, generational confusion. The city's official publications celebrated railway expansion, university enrollment, industrial growth. The data they didn't collect told different stories. Neighborhoods where 3 generations lived under one roof now housed strangers who shared nothing but proximity. Traditional support systems, family networks, guild structures, community obligations, had been dismantled faster than new ones could form. Tokyo had become a city where everyone performed modernity while privately negotiating with the past, and that constant negotiation was exhausting people in ways that wouldn't appear in economic reports for another generation. By century's end, Tokyo had delivered what the Meiji reformers demanded: a modern capital that could host foreign diplomats without embarrassment, produce military equipment without foreign dependency, and demonstrate that non-Western societies could master industrial systems. The city looked nothing like it had in 1868. But looking modern and being modern were different conditions. The promise had been transformation. The reality was performance. Beneath brick facades and electric lights, Tokyo operated on contradictions that would define Japan for the next century. A society that changed everything visible, while leaving fundamental structures untouched, that adopted Western forms while preserving traditional hierarchies, that industrialized at human costs it refused to calculate. The generation that built modern Tokyo believed speed was survival. They were probably correct. But acceleration has consequences that appear slowly. The city that rebuilt itself in 30 years would spend the next 50 processing what that speed had broken, displaced, and left unfinished. Tokyo in 1900 wasn't a completed project. It was an experiment still running, with results decades away from clarity. What the city had proven was that societies could function in 2 centuries simultaneously. What it couldn't yet answer was whether people could sustain that division indefinitely, or what happens to those who spend their entire lives translating between worlds that were never meant to reconcile.